Microsoft Ignite really highlighted the dawn of the age of agents. With increasingly intelligent systems, the need for robust security is paramount. And you've brought some Windows security updates and KDE articles and even a known issue report for us to dig into today. What stands out most to you?
I think it's the connections between the CVEs, the KB articles addressing them, and then this really big issue with the WinUp SDK package on Windows 10 22H2.
Okay, let's break it down then. Starting with the Windows CVEs, the PortalFuse report has 3 total, right?
Yeah, 1 brand new one and 2 that got updated. The new one, CVE 2024-43637, is an elevation of privilege in the Windows USB Video Class System driver.
The USB Video Class System driver.
Right. It's caused by an out-of-bounds read when it parses data from a USB device.
Interesting.
Yeah. The thing that's notable here is the attack vector.
It needs a physical attack.
Exactly.
Not as much of a concern these days.
True, but it still has a CVSS score of 6.8, so we can't forget about it.
Especially for those high security systems.
Right. And then the updated CVEs. CVE 2024-49054 is a spoofing vulnerability in Microsoft Edge, the Chromium-based one.
Oh, so in Edge. How so?
It has insufficient UI warnings for really long URLs, and those could mislead users into clicking on bad links.
So they might think they're clicking one thing, but
they're not, right?
Classic social engineering. What's the CVSS score?
Only 4.3, so lower than the last one, and it needs a user to actually interact with it to work. But with all the phishing going around these days, it's still something to keep an eye on.
Definitely. What about the other updated CVE?
That's CVE 2024-11395, and that one is a type confusion vulnerability in the V8 engine in Chromium.
In the V8 engine, okay.
It can let an attacker run whatever code they want, and since Edge is Chromium OSS, it inherits that vulnerability.
I see.
The good news is the newest Edge update, version 131.0.2903.63, fixes it.
So update Edge. Got it. You mentioned a known issue earlier, the one with Windows 10 22H2 not being able to update or uninstall package apps.
Yeah, that one. That stems from the WinUp SDK 1.6.2 package.
From that, okay.
Yeah. Something about how it interacts with the app deployment and management system just doesn't work right when you install or remove packaged apps.
So it causes conflicts. Is it widespread?
It is, yeah. You'll see the generic Microsoft Store error message, something happened on our end. And if you try PowerShell, you'll see deployment failed with H result 0 by 800.73 CFA.
So no way to update or remove those apps then?
Nope. And it's not just, some random apps either. Big ones like Teams are hit by it too.
Wow. So not directly related to the security updates then?
No, it's not. But it's still a big deal for sure. Thankfully, Microsoft did release KB504671 to fix it.
And that's already out.
It came out on November 21st.
So keep your systems updated, everyone. Now let's talk KB articles. There are a few in the source material.
Yeah, we've got a mix of updates and improvements here. KB504713, for example, improves the setup binaries for Windows 11 24H2 and Server 2025 feature updates.
Oh, that's an interesting one. It isn't on Windows Update, though.
You got it. Only on the Microsoft Update catalog, probably because it changes setup binaries and they want to be careful with that.
Yeah, makes sense. What else?
KB5048779 improves the Windows 11 24H2 out-of-box experience, during the setup. Makes it work better when you're connected to the internet. Then we have KB5046732. That's a preview update for Windows 11 22H2 and 23H2. And KB5046714 is a preview for Windows 10 22H2. But it's important to note that because of the holidays.
Microsoft is slowing down operations.
Right. So no non-security preview releases in December, just the regular monthly security ones.
Good to know. So we've talked about the CVEs, the fixes for them, that big packaged app issue, and some KB articles. But before we move on, I want to circle back to the 2 CVEs that affect both Chromium and Edge. That was CVE 2024-49054, the spoofing one, and then CVE 2024-11395, the type confusion vulnerability.
Both are addressed in the latest Edge update, version 131.0.2903.63.
Update. If someone wanted to, learn more about these, where would you point them?
The Google Chrome releases page has tons of info about vulnerabilities in Chromium, which, like we discussed, affect Edge too. It's a great way to stay up to date on all the security patches and updates.
Yeah, it's amazing how vulnerabilities in something as fundamental as Chromium can ripple outwards. It really shows how interconnected software development is and how important a holistic approach to security is.
Absolutely. Today's digital world is so complex, you have to understand these connections to really stay ahead of the threats out there.
And speaking of threats, all this innovation with AI agents.
It does make you think, right? Will all this focus on AI mean that we forget about more traditional security issues?
That's a great question. We'd probably do a whole deep dive on that alone. but I think we've covered the important points for today.
We've gone over the CVEs, what they mean, the WinApp SDK problem, and even a bunch of KB articles. It's all part of the bigger picture of security.
And the key takeaway is stay in the know, stay aware, and keep your systems updated.
I second that. It really does. Are we ready for the security challenges that will inevitably come with all these new AI systems?
It's a really interesting thought, but for our listeners' sake, let's bring it back down to earth a bit. We've covered the CVEs and the known issue and the KB articles. What else is there?
Oh, there's always more. Like CVE 2024-43637, the elevation of privilege vulnerability we talked about.
In the USB video class driver.
Right, that one. It exploits a weakness in how the driver handles memory when it parses data.
So it's a memory management problem.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that when you're dealing with low-level stuff like device drivers, secure coding is really important.
Even a tiny error can snowball into a big security problem. What about that spoofing vulnerability in Edge? CVE 2024-49054. Anything else there?
It might look like it's just a UI issue, but it's more complicated than that. The way Edge shows URLs, especially super long ones, is the real problem.
Right.
There aren't good enough warnings to tell users that the displayed URL and the actual website might be different.
Oh, so it's a combination of URL parsing and the UI.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that security needs to be considered everywhere, from the back-end code all the way to what the user sees.
Right. And the known issue with packaged apps on Windows 10 22H2, that was a big one. We know WinApp SDK 1.6.2 is the problem, but technically what happened?
It's all about how that SDK interacts with the Windows app deployment system. Version 1.6.2 changed the way app manifests and dependencies are dealt with, and that caused a bunch of conflicts.
Conflicts during both install and uninstall.
Yeah.
So one small SDK change can really have a ripple effect.
It happens all the time in software. Dependencies are tricky, and even tiny isolated changes can cause problems. This really shows why testing is crucial and why you need a good rollback plan in case something like this happens.
Speaking of testing, let's go back to the KB articles. Is there more to them than meets the eye?
Definitely. KB5ZOR 7134, the update for setup binaries in Windows 11 24H2 and Server 2025, it's actually more than just a tweak. It's part of Microsoft's work on making the Windows update process itself more secure.
Oh, wow. Making the updating more secure. That's smart.
Yeah, it's really important, but people don't always think about it. By making the update process more secure, they make it much harder for attackers to do things like inject malicious code.
What about the KB articles that improve the user experience? Like KB5048779 for the Windows 11 24H2 OUOBE. Is that security related at all?
Well, it might seem like it's just about making things easier for users, but actually a better setup process can improve security indirectly.
Okay, how so?
If a user is less confused and frustrated during setup, they're more likely to pay attention to those important security messages and set things up properly.
So a happy user is a secure user.
You could say that, yeah. User experience and security go hand in hand. A system that's easy to understand empowers users to make smart security choices.
We also have the preview updates, KB5046732 for Windows 11 and KB5046714 for Windows 10. Lots of bug fixes and improvements as usual.
And that little note about things slowing down for the holidays.
Yeah, no non-security preview releases in December.
It makes sense. They need a break too. But it shows how Microsoft is always trying to balance getting updates out quickly with not disrupting users, especially at busy times.
True. It's not just about patching the vulnerabilities, it's also about when and how you do it. Okay, let's get back to those Chromium and Edge vulnerabilities.
It's really interesting that both came from Chromium. It shows how complicated modern software is.
With all the shared code bases and open source components.
Exactly. It's great for innovation, but it also means vulnerabilities can have a big impact.
Makes vulnerability management and patching even more important.
For sure. Organizations have to keep an eye out for problems in third-party components and update quickly to reduce their risk.
You mentioned the Google Chrome releases page is a good place to keep up with Chromium issues. How does that help people using Edge?
Well, since Edge is built on Chromium, any vulnerability in Chromium could affect Edge. If you keep up with the Chromium releases and security advisories, you'll know about potential Edge problems even before Microsoft releases a patch.
A good way to stay one step ahead.
Exactly. Staying informed is key in today's world.
This brings up a really interesting point. Are all these advancements in AI creating brand new security risks while we're trying to fix the old ones?
That's a question we need to think about carefully. AI adds new complexities to every system and application it touches, meaning there are more ways for attackers to get in.
Like a whole new way of thinking about security.
That's right. Traditional security might not be enough anymore. We need new ways of thinking and new tools to make sure AI is secure.
Exciting, but also a little bit scary. We're basically creating the security playbook for AI from scratch.
It's how progress works. We push the limits of technology and we face new challenges. We have to be innovative and cautious at the same time, always putting security first.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, from the details of individual vulnerabilities to how AI is changing the entire security landscape. It's been a fascinating journey.
I agree. We've really explored how technology and security are connected and how the threats we face are always changing.
As we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think the big takeaway here is that we can't just wait for vulnerabilities to pop up and then react.
Right.
We have to think ahead, be proactive, especially with technologies that are changing as fast as AI.
Absolutely. We need a fundamental change in how we approach security.
Exactly.
It has to be part of the design and development process from the very beginning, not something you tack on at the end.
I completely agree.
We've seen how even small mistakes, whether it's in the code or the UI or even just an SDK update, can cause massive problems.
Yeah.
It really highlights how important it is to think about security from every angle.
You need a holistic view for sure.
Every single layer, from the hardware to the software, the network to the user interface, needs to be looked at carefully and made as secure as possible.
Every single one.
And as we move towards more complex systems, especially those using AI,
It becomes even more crucial.
AI adds a whole new layer of complexity to security. We need to rethink our old models and come up with new strategies to deal with the risks.
They need to be prepared.
It's a fascinating challenge. We're essentially creating the security rule book for AI as we go.
We are, yeah. It's exciting and a bit daunting.
It all comes down to awareness,
Definitely.
vigilance, and a commitment to always improving.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Staying up to date on threats, applying those updates, and creating a culture of security awareness are all essential.
Absolutely essential.
I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. We've gone from the very specific details of vulnerabilities to the bigger picture of how AI is impacting the security world.
It's been a real deep dive.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. It's been a truly enlightening conversation.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, stay curious, stay informed, and as always, stay secure. We'll see you next time.